Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to dive into how the name of an ancient god, a god of life and rain, somehow ended up in one of the most disturbing scandals of our time. And more than that, how did that god become a symbol for ultimate evil?
Okay, so let's just get right into it. The whole thing kicks off with these documents, supposedly from the U.S. Department of Justice. And in them, a bank account connected to Jeffrey Epstein is reportedly named Baal. Yeah, Baal, B-A-L. The exact same name as this ancient god. So you have to ask, right? Is that just a bizarre coincidence, or is there something more going on here?
And this is where the plot really thickens. If you look online, you'll find two different versions of this document floating around. One of them clearly shows the account name Baal. But another version, the one you can find on the Department of Justice website, well, that name is missing. And that single difference has lit an absolute firestorm of speculation. Was it a typo? A simple clerical error? Or was it a deliberate cover-up? An attempt to hide a connection to something much, much older? This has poured gasoline on theories that Epstein's island wasn't really a party spot. I mean, think about it. The most powerful people in the world don't need to fly thousands of miles just for some fun. The speculation, the real theory here, is that it was a modern-day hub for system of control. A place where the deepest, darkest secrets of the powerful were recorded and then used for leverage. A system built entirely on fear, not pleasure. But to really understand why this name, Baal, carries so much weight, we've got to hit the rewind button. I'm talking way, way back. Who was Baal before all of this? Who was he to the people who actually worshipped him thousands of years ago?
So let's paint a picture. You're in ancient Canaan. That's basically modern-day Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. Now, unlike Egypt with its nice, predictable Nile River, or Mesopotamia with the Tigris and Euphrates, Canaan had none of that. Your entire survival depended on one thing and one thing only: rain falling from the sky. If the rains came, you lived. If they didn't, you starved. So it's no surprise that the god who controlled the weather wasn't just a god, he was everything.
And here is a super important point. Baal wasn't actually a name, not at first. It was a title, kind of like we use president or king. It just meant lord or master. So every city had its own local Baal. You might have the Baal of Tyre, who was the lord of trade, or Baal Hamon, the lord of the sun. But the big one, the most powerful of them all, was the Baal of the storm, the guy who brought the rain. He was the ultimate lord of survival.
And his symbols tell you everything you need to know about him. It's all about power and life. He's shown holding a lightning bolt, total command of the storm. He's linked with the bull, which was the ancient symbol for strength and fertility. They called him the rider of the clouds, and they believed his home was on the highest mountains, the places that seemed to scrape the sky and touch the heavens.
It's actually incredible that we know his story, but we do, thanks to these ancient clay tablets they found in a city called Ugarit. It's this epic myth. First, Baal fights Yam, the god of the chaotic sea, and he wins, bringing order to the whole world. But then, right at the height of his power, he gets challenged by Mot, the god of death and drought. Mot tricks him, swallows him whole, and drags him down to the underworld. And the second Baal is gone, the world just dies. The rain stops, the fields dry up, everything withers. That is, until his fierce sister, Annette, goes down there, kicks Mot's butt, and brings Baal back to the world. And with him, life and the rains return. This whole story, the cycle of life and death with the seasons, it set the stage for one of the biggest religious showdowns in history. So how did this god of life, this hero, become the #1 villain for a new faith that was popping up in the exact same region?
Well, when the ancient Israelites came into Canaan, they were faced with a huge choice. Their god, Yahweh, was the god of their people, their history, their covenant. But all their new neighbors, they were all worshiping Baal to make sure their crops grew. You know, if you're a farmer, it's just a practical choice. Pray to the local god who handles the rain. This created this massive rivalry. See, Baal was just one god among many, but Yahweh demanded total, exclusive devotion. You couldn't have it both ways. And this tension is just perfectly captured in the story of the prophet Elijah. He saw his people trying to play both sides, worshiping Yahweh in private, but, hedging their bets with offerings to Baal for their farms. So he confronts them with this incredibly powerful question, basically saying, guys, make a choice. And this is where we get the setup for the ultimate divine showdown. So on Mount Carmel, Elijah challenges 450 of Baal's prophets. The challenge? Get your God to send fire from heaven. So they pray, and they dance, and they shout for hours, and nothing. Crickets. Elijah starts mocking them, saying stuff like, shout louder, maybe he's sleeping and you need to wake him up. Then Elijah built his altar, and just to make a point, he drenches the whole thing in water. He says one short prayer, and bam, fire falls from the sky and incinerates everything. The story was this huge statement. There is only one God.
But here's the thing. It wasn't enough to just beat Baal in a story. To completely wipe out his influence, you had to do more. You had to make him not just a false god, but an evil one. His entire identity had to be taken apart piece by piece and corrupted over centuries.
So, how did they do it? It was a step-by-step demolition job. There was a local version of Baal called Baal-Zebul, which meant exalted prince. Pretty cool title. Well, his rivals, the writers of the Hebrew Bible, they took that name and just twisted it a little bit, turning it into Beelzebub. And that name was an insult. It means Lord of the Flies. By the time you get to the New Testament, Beelzebub isn't just an idol to be mocked, he's a full-on prince of demons. And it keeps going. By the Middle Ages, in these crazy demonology books, the name gets shortened back to Baal, and now he's listed as the first king of hell.
So, a mocked god is one thing, a demon is a whole other level. But the final nail in Baal's coffin, the accusation that would forever seal his reputation as pure evil, was something truly horrifying: the charge of child sacrifice. Now, the most graphic and disturbing stories about this don't actually come from the Bible. They come from Greek and Roman writers, and they're talking about Carthage, this super powerful city in North Africa that worshipped a version of Baal. They wrote about these terrible scenes where, in times of crisis, the rich and powerful would sacrifice their own children to their god. They'd place them in the hands of a huge bronze statue, and the child would just slide down into a pit of fire. For hundreds of years, historians just didn't know what to make of these stories. Were they true, or was it just propaganda? I mean, come on, these were written by the Romans, and Carthage was their #1 enemy. And what's the oldest trick in the book when you're at war? You accuse your enemy of being barbaric monsters. For the longest time, there was just no physical proof either way. And then, archaeology gave us a really chilling answer. In the ruins of ancient Carthage, they found a special kind of cemetery, a sacred place they called a tophet. And inside, archaeologists unearthed these urns containing the cremated remains of more than 20,000 infants and small children. Now, the tophet is still fiercely debated. One side says, look, this is undeniable proof. The inscriptions on the stones aren't sad, they're giving thanks to Baal for hearing their prayers, like they'd fulfilled a promise. But the other side argues this was a special cemetery for babies who were stillborn or died of natural causes, and they were just being dedicated to the gods. The truth is, it's just deeply unsettling, and we may never know for sure. But the evidence tied Baal to the darkest ritual imaginable. And that brings us all the way back to where we started. From an ancient, debated ritual to a very modern online conspiracy theory. What on earth is the connection? Look, the theory isn't that anybody is literally worshiping a statue. The connection being made is about the system. It's about a pattern. In the ancient world, the system was that the powerful sacrificed their most precious thing, their child, to Baal, to keep their own power and prosperity. The modern allegation is a system where the powerful sacrifice their most precious thing, their darkest secret, to a network that then has total control over them. In both cases, the core idea is the same. Power is maintained by sacrificing the vulnerable and ruling through fear. And this is exactly why the story of Abraham is so revolutionary, such a complete game changer. In a world where gods were demanding the ultimate sacrifice from you, the God of Abraham stops the knife. He provides the sacrifice himself. It's a total reversal of that whole system. The message was like a moral earthquake. God doesn't want your child, he wants your trust. It's this massive shift from a God who takes to a God who gives. At the end of the day, Baal's journey is a wild case study in how history is written by the winners. You have a god of life and nature who gets redefined as a rival, then his name is corrupted to make him a demon, and finally he gets blamed for the most horrible crime you can imagine. And that name, Baal, it carries the weight of all those ancient battles right into our world today. So we're left with this one final provocative thought. Baal, the storm god, with his bull horns and his lightning bolts, yeah, he's long gone. But maybe the system he came to represent, the one where power is held through fear and secrets and the sacrifice of the innocent, maybe that never really went away. Maybe it just changed its name.